You're listening to the Valley Current.
Welcome into the Valley Current, Jan. We've been talking about your work and as it's now evolved, because you're, in my opinion, you're a software expert and you've done a lot of stuff in your lifetime, but now you're doing AI stuff. So tell us more about your evolution and where you've gone with your career in AI, because it's obviously such a hot topic these days, right?
So the first thing I want to say is, regardless of what, you hear many people trying to make that transition, I found that transition to be incredibly hard. Okay. And the last job that I had, we did what's known as a named entity retrieval. So if you fed me any kind of document, we can retrieve any field that you wanted: date, price, invoice number, whatever. And that has a very
unstructured data, lots of unstructured data.
Yes, sir. So we would take unstructured data and using AI, we'd hand back some nice structured key value pair.
Right.
And then before then, I went, I worked at a company that did ratings. So if you released a movie, there's 202 ratings board throughout the world. So if you release a movie, if it's rated PG in the United States, there's a corresponding one. And it's not straightforward because culture values vastly differ from country to country.
What's R here might be X in China or
Pakistan. But the thing though is that they have different tolerances. So we're very prudish and puritanical in those countries, but Scandinavian countries have a very, very high tolerance for the more racy subject matter, but incredibly low tolerance for violence. Whereas we
like violence. We like violence. It's like G rated for violence, right?
And what I wanted to tell you is that if I didn't take advantage of certain things, I probably could not have made the transition. It was just by complete serendipity that my oldest child was studying computer science and AI at Stanford.
Okay.
And it wasn't like I had this great idea to learn along with her, but it was just pride of being a dad.
Yeah.
So when your kid asks you, do you know how to solve this? You're not going to say you don't know. So I would ask her, can I have access to the school material? And when that was the way it started. But after 4 years of, studying along with, some of the best profs in the world, then you really get to understand it. And you couple that with a mathematical background that had to accrue in order to get a doctorate. That was the only combination that enabled me to do this. So folks who are out there that are very ambitious, who maybe start initially with things like Coursera or any number of online available, I've come to realize how they barely begin to scratch the surface. Right. And if they are genuinely serious, then it is incredibly important to, get to the heart of the matter. And another completely contradictory realization that I made was AI almost is never capable of garnering insight. You have to actually fundamentally understand the crux of the problem you're trying to solve. Right. And then learn what the right AI model to apply to that model.
Right.
So I can give you a couple analogies. I'm in this field, as we started talking about, where we're trying to apply artificial intelligence to the dental industry.
Okay.
And it seems that there have been other folks who similarly tried to do this space, and they flamed out wildly. Not because what they tried wasn't right or wrong, but they had success in one field, and they tried to apply it in a disparate field where you have the typical problem where once you have a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail.
Right. They think, for example, that we can map.
That's exactly right.
Looking at a tumor in a female breast, and we can look at a tooth and map the same algorithms onto
That is exactly right.
Yeah, and it doesn't necessarily
It doesn't work. So the two concrete examples that I saw was a company whose colleagues had experience with facial recognition software thought that there was a similar applicability to dental, and that's largely not true.
Okay.
Because the big breakthrough in facial recognition was these notion of eigenfaces, basically breaking down fundamental structure of human faces. So even if you wear glasses or have facial hair, some of the rudimentary proportions remain constant.
Right.
So you can kind of constantly recognize.
It's pretty amazing when you go through security and slash.
It really is.
It's all it's all like it's all really very seamless. It's amazing to me how accurate it must be that it lets you into the country pretty quickly if you have global entry, at least.
Yes, sir.
I mean, it's amazing.
It's amazing. So without actually having to do the basic research and find the mathematical analog to teeth to represent the same insight that eigenfaces had,
right?
It had no applicability.
Well, teeth are probably like mountains. They just all over the place. Like there's not a lot of perfect structure in people's mouths. If you look, I always look. Lee's always criticizing me. I always look at these TV people, and they open their mouth, and I say, she's got kind of a problem with her. I just say stuff like that, and Lee, my wife, says stuff like, "You're so critical. You're always critical of people's smile or." And I said, she should really get that tooth fixed because
I think
she's on TV,
right? I think you're incredibly perceptive, and you pick up on things that most people don't, and that's why I've always admired your acuity. Like you have like an engineer's mind, just happened to be a lawyer. But another similar company they had some success with silicon manufacturing, and they thought they could apply that process toward teeth, and that also turned out to be not true. So you really have to get to the crux of the problem, and try to find out how can I very, very quickly knock out huge parts of the data space so I can narrow down to the answer space. Because the answer space is always a very small fraction of the data space, right?
Right.
So that's the name of the game. And if my daughter ever calls me out on it, I'm going to completely ignore it. But if I didn't go through that, the basic rudimentary education with her, I probably could not have made the transition.
But she gave you access to all the Stanford slides, Stanford textbooks.
I was paying tuition. That's the least you could do. You know how much it costs a year?
You have the right to it. I'm just saying you have the right to it. But she was essentially saying, Dad, I'm going to give you access to I don't know what they do, Blackboard or some tool at Stanford, right?
I don't know. But
so you got double advantage. You got like a PhD from Stanford as well as a PhD.
Well, not a PhD, just an undergrad. She only did an undergrad at Stanford, but it was enough,
Is this your youngest daughter? Because your eldest?
No. The oldest one was there. So she was at Stanford from, let's see if I get this right, 2014 to 2018.
Okay, is that when you did it?
Yeah, it could not have worked out better because the AI nuclear winter really got lifted maybe a decade before then in Canada. Right. And then they were just getting to the point of, applying these things for computer vision. Mm-hmm. There was a nascent stage of, autonomous driving, some of the facial recognition stuff we're talking about. Certainly, handwritten recognition, right? Almost everything that we send by the email now is read by a computer.
Right.
So the timing worked out really great, So
and she's at Oxford now, right? This is your eldest daughter.
This is my oldest. Actually, she's now at MIT. After Stanford, she won the Gates Prize, so she went to Cambridge to start grad school.
Nice.
And then while at Cambridge, she got some good results. So she applied and got the National Science Foundation
That's
grant.
big.
So yeah, the country's picking up her tab at MIT.
That's
So
huge. She's getting a
yeah.
PhD at MIT.
Yes, sir.
Wow. That's in
Yeah,
data
yeah.
science.
No, she's doing in a field known as computational material science. So she's trying to design the next generation of computing fabric, right? So right now we're literally reaching the end of the Moore's law,
Right.
right? So
Right.
we're down to like 3 nanometers, which
Right.
roughly, not exactly, but roughly is about 3,000 atoms across per trace.
Right.
When you're down to that few number of atoms, just by electricity running through them, if you knock out enough of them
Right.
and you lose that line,
Right.
what are you going to do? Right?
Right.
Like how much lower can you go?
Right. So the
nanometers,
laws
1
of
nanometer?
physics, the laws of physics take over.
Yes, sir.
You have to
So,
do something different. Maybe it's
well, this is what she's doing different. She's trying to design the next generation of transistors to hold not just 0 and 1, but many, many, many values. So to hold multiple bytes within a single transistor.
so this is called quantum computing.
No, that's the next stage.
Oh, it's the next
one
stage.
she's doing, yeah. Believe it or not, this intermediate phase is called analog computing. Because you remember in like a record player,
Right.
we went from the analog of the record player to the
Right.
digital.
Right.
This is backwards. So, instead of having a digitized value for the sound or post-code modulation, you have contiguous value on a record. So here, going rather than from 0 to 1 on a transistor, you're going from many, many more values. And the quantum computing is learning to deal with this notion of qubits,
Right.
where instead of having a deterministic model, you have a probabilistic model. And just by the nature of how fast these subatomic particles move around, you can have phenomenally fast computation power, right? So,
And she headed in that. Is she headed in that direction, or she's in sort of a subfield?
I think she likes the field she's on now.
Mm-hmm.
It's dramatically newer and different. A lot more physics. She sometimes, well, we had this one conversation where she started by saying, quantum mechanics, right? That is, she's starting to write formula, and I had to like make this confession, say, no, I don't. And I think of myself.
She's writing a formula on a whiteboard for you?
No, on a napkin. We're having lunch. I just went out. When she passed her quals, she kind of didn't stay really long for Christmas because she had to prepare for qual exam. So it was her birthday. She passed her quals. So I went out there to help her celebrate. And we're having lunch. And I asked her, so what are you doing? And she just takes out this pad out of her bag and she started to write this. And I'm like, no, honey, I don't know quantum mechanics.
Wow. Well, you could tailgate on that and learn quantum mechanics.
Maybe,
next, right?
maybe. But she looked at me so disappointedly.
You helped me so much with the AI stuff.
She never thinks I helped her, but she looked at me like, oh my God, I just realized that my dad's not that bright, something like that. Yeah.
But you imagine you've got super, super smart daughters, and you have a son too, who's also smart.
I do.
And Min Hee worked for us, of course, and we loved her. And she's probably powering her way through the University of Chicago, right?
She really is. She's like one of the, well-ranked undergrad. She's winning awards. She won this award called Harris Scholarship. I forgot which class she was a top student in, but academically she's doing well. I think this is almost end of her junior year, and I think she got maybe like 1 or 2 A- or something like that. So.
No, but she's exceptional, and I'm sure she'll follow in her older sister's footsteps and get all sorts of additional.
I'm not sure about that. I think she still has a heart set on studying law.
Really? Well, she's welcome to come back to us.
Yeah.
To get
so
more
she
training.
said that she's going to work a few years to save up some money for tuition. And that's still very much her goal.
Well, law school is changing, and AI is making a big difference in law, just as it's going to make a big difference in medicine. I told you the story before we got on of I had this incident, and I have to tell you, I used various AI tools just to research how I was going to get fixed up. And it was much more informative, and it led me to a lot of videos that were much more sophisticated than all the doctors that I visited. And when I told them, yeah, I knew about this and I knew about that, they were like shocked. Like, how did you learn? I said, well, I've watched like 6 hours of different people talk about these sorts of injuries. They were like, wow, well, we could have never given you that overview. Now, I happen to be someone like you that likes to learn very diverse information. And if I can get access to it, and that to me is really what I think is the advantage of where we're headed with AI, because I never liked doing Google searches. I always felt like it was mostly advertising that you got back. Now you can get back stuff that does have more density to it. I agree with you. It doesn't necessarily give you the aha insight. The aha insight's got to happen from your creativity. But you can put a lot of stuff together that really helps you get to the insight faster, the human insight faster. And I think more and more people, including law firms, will want people who can leverage those tools. Just like you'd say, they want people that can write Excel spreadsheets or macros for Excel. These are just power tools that we've enabled with computing. And there are still lawyers that can't get on a Zoom thing on their own. They need, quote, a Zoom technician, literally. Like, there are mediators that run mediations, but they won't touch a keyboard. They'll have somebody else kind of run the Zoom because they worry they might cause it to fail. Like, they worry about, having some failure. But, having failure is the way to get to learning, right? Like,
it's so remarkable you say that. And I'm going to harken back for those people who are listening to this who don't know. Jack was one of my original investors at the startup that I tried to do. And it was largely AR, VR based company. But even then, Jack had the brilliant insight to think about in a not too distant future, there's going to be an enhanced reality. And I think this is exactly where this is headed. And one of the reasons that I decided to pivot and go to medical-based AI was largely because the power that I saw firsthand, and I might be overstating this, but I think in the next 10 years, we're headed for almost like a ground-shifting change in the workforce. I think very much like what you're saying, these power tools can very much be cobbled together to do a lot of work that right now is categorized as white collar.
Right.
No matter how complex, long as it's repetitive and can be described in a quantifiable manner, I will guarantee it can be replaced. And I saw it firsthand at the last company that did, as you astutely pointed out, the unstructured data into structured data. And, this is exactly what is happening with, OpenAI's, they can write even not sophisticated, but at least definitely worthwhile for unit testing and QA kind of work. It's trained on the entire corpora of GitHub. I thought the CEO of Microsoft was maybe not too bright buying GitHub, but I was the one that wasn't too bright.
It was a smart move. I mean, it was a smart move to see that as that's such a big corpus of software that we can train AI on. Like, to me, that was an amazing acquisition, and it's going to lead to an amazing payoff because I think every programmer is using Copilot, which is the Microsoft tool that does the software generation, right?
I think it's only going to get better. The term Copilot actually, in spite of Mr. Nadella's best effort, is not a Microsoft term. In fact, they have now Copilots for Microsoft Office.
Right.
It's kind of slow, you know. and it has to churn away. But I think in the next 10 years, definitely, right? So
maybe
we
less than
largely,
that. Maybe a lot less than that. I know Musk has said it might happen within the next year or two that we're going to
so,
get.
I have a particular bias against anything that gentleman says, having actually worked for the man for a few years.
You would be a billionaire now if he came through for you.
No,
That's
no, but
what I remember.
he's more given to hyperbole.
Yeah, but it works.
So,
for them. I mean, it works for them. And look, they had a bad quarter. They reported yesterday. The stock still took off because he said, you know what, we're headed into the future. It's going to be great. We're going to have autonomous robots.
and he did like a complete 180. I know this because Drew Bagnolia, the guy who left, I know him. I used to work with him,
Right.
I heard that he was leading the quote unquote the internal low cost option, and he left because they terminated that project.
Right.
Yet within days, Mr. Musk says one thing, and then the stock pops right back up. And I'm not entirely sure it's sustainable. Very much like the way Cybertruck sucked up all the energy and resource out of that company. We'll see if this low-cost alternative doesn't show up in 2025, 2026, 2027. Things will go back to normal.
Well, I have to say, I bought a Tesla a decade ago. I still have it. It's a great car. And it does stuff that you wouldn't have even imagined a car can do, in the sense that you plug it into your Wi-Fi network and it downloads updated software, and the software does get better and better. My only bitch is they sometimes change where the buttons are. Like, you're used to hitting a certain button to get something to happen on a screen. They move the button and you have no idea where the hell they moved the button to. It's like, I'm happy with the button where it is, but let me tell this one other story. We were at some meetings at the University of Virginia. There's actually a lot going on, a lot of startup activity happening in Charlottesville, Virginia. It's a really interesting, there's this whole movement towards these places that are a couple of hours from major cities like Washington, D.C.
Absolutely. Did you hear Oracle say they're going to move to Nashville?
They're going to move to Nashville. That's pretty big. I just saw that. Yeah.
And that's because of Wake Forest,
So let me just tell you, I rented this car. It was a Model Y, brand new Model Y. Like, it had very few miles on it. It was shocking. I wasn't used to it. You would think it would be the same screen as the Model S. I have a Model S. I get in the Model Y. First of all, you have to have this little card that you have to put in the center console to get the car to start. With the Model S, you just have the key in your pocket. You don't have to have any card. Like, that to me is such a stupid thing. If I could say, Elon, just change that stupid card thing, because you have to take the card out. You have to place it in the middle of the console. It's just stupid. It's just dumb, considering how people are used to just getting in a car with a key in their pocket and then pressing a button, right? But I couldn't find the buttons to, like, turn on the windshield wipers, and I ended up resorting to the voice command where it said turn on windshield. Maybe they moved. Maybe there is no button on my car. There's an actual stick. This is a 10-year-old Tesla that's just working like a champ. It's amazingly low maintenance, if you ask me, compared to other things. But in general,
that's the progression, isn't it? Like, the Tesla was able to look around the way things were done more or less in an automobile for the last 50 years. And they're able to make this humongous leap. And now if you look at the cars like Rivian and Lucid Motors, I have a friend who is head of the mobile at Lucid Motors.
Right.
And then you can clearly tell, where they got the springboard. Just like, Windows 95 essentially took all the keystrokes that, Steve Jobs lovingly created. But the issue about things moving around and so forth, I think that has more to do with the fact that too many things are vying for Musk's attention, and right. I think Twitter sucking up all of them. So there's nobody really to mind the store anymore.
Well, I think it's the same play as we talked about. He bought Twitter for the data so that he could train whatever is this latest AI thing, because that's the other thing they're announcing. And the data turns out to be really valuable. And a lot of companies, including law firms, have a tremendous amount of data that they've never really leveraged. Like there's just a tremendous amount of,
so this is the part that I was hoping that our conversation would go to. So I'm going to give you some basic parameters, okay? So I like to believe that what you're saying is true. But if you look at if they say the proof is in the pudding,
right?
Elon Musk Grok is not doing so great by comparison. I chase these leaderboards all the time.
Right.
So the last, they just released Llama 3, but the last one, Llama 2, was trained on 10 terabytes, only 10 terabytes of Facebook data. Okay. Even then, it took them $2 million of cloud computing time, of which they own. Those are just basically their cost to run this, to be able to come up with a 70 billion weights model. Now, recently I went to the NVIDIA conference. You know, it's once a year event. This is the first time since COVID it was done in person. And I attended a very interesting fireside chat. And some of the participants were the leaders of ServiceNow, BlackRock, you know, both from IT as well as finance. And they told me something that was, in my opinion, like earth-shattering. They said 92% of Fortune 1000 companies could care less any kind of benefit they can get if they cannot in-house that technology.
Really?
Really, really. And the other shoe dropping is that advances have been done enough, and this is largely what I was doing before, that I can very easily create an air-gap in-house system for just about anybody at next to no money upfront-wise to rival ChatGPT. This is all within possible. So
you're saying they want on-premises servers and on-premises everything to control as opposed to being in the cloud?
It's not so much where it's sitting. It's more like, is it self-contained and closed from the outside world?
Okay, I'm with you. Okay.
So, you know, not everybody's got the appetite to have a noisy server farm in their premise.
Right.
But that's not the important part. The important part is that in no point in time is the notion of role-based accessibility ever violated.
Okay.
Okay. So where the trend is going is that there's been advent of many open source model, not just Llama from Facebook, but Mistral from a French company by the same name.
Right.
DBRX from Databricks. There's a Toye Quinn out of Baidu. And believe it or not, even Microsoft released one called Wizard LM, which they took the Mistral and they enhanced it. So, I mean, if you have the appetite for this, I can just keep nerding away and tell you more information.
No, it's interesting to me because the insight that, in fact, 92% of corporations were going to firewall off access to their LLM. They want their LLM to be like their trade secrets. That's the way.
No, it's not there so much their LLM. What they're worried about is that if they provide the data in order to extract information from, they're worried that they're going to let open Pandora's box and they can't control who's going to see that information.
Okay. All right.
Okay, that's fundamentally the problem. So what I was trying to say is that you can take a model, and it's, in my opinion alone, a misnomer to call it language model. Yeah. Everybody calls it large language model because the very, very first application of a transformer was something called BERT, bidirectional encoding representation for transformers. Okay. And they used transformers to meet and exceed translation capability, right? For example, for the diplomatic corps.
Right.
And then people started to say things like, now we have machines that can meet or exceed the diplomatic course translation capability.
Yeah, English to French, and right.
Yeah, but the point here is that that's the wrong way to think about it, because in order to kind of mitigate any kind of misunderstanding at the UN, the acceptable alternatives and synonyms that are used in translation is very, very rigid. It doesn't have the nuance and the connotation and colloquial expression that normal people use. So if you say, I'm going to create a task that is really, really well suited for computers, then of course computers going to match and exceed, right? But if you throw in a lot of things, and this is where the point I'm trying to get at, which is you have information that very much like language is changing and organic and different. How do you then go about feeding that information back into your system? So even if you weren't worried about the electric fence mode, how do you keep your information fresh and updated and perpetually renewed? And there's a whole sequence of methods called, this is basically how to get the most out of these LLMs without actually changing the value. Okay, so you have this thing that takes up, an enormous amount of space, 70 billion weights. But what you do is there's two methods. I'll tell you a couple of them. First one's known as RAG, retrieval augmented generation. Okay, or
three-letter acronym.
They're all TLAs. All TLAs.
Right.
Okay. And what this basically does is very much in the spirit of the, representation. Instead of words, they call them tokens.
Right.
What they do is they will vectorize new documents, okay, and then put that in a vector database. And instead of allowing the LLM to basically come up with any answers willy-nilly, you essentially constrain what we talked about earlier, narrowing down to the potential answer space at a much, much smaller than the data space. So you can basically feed a RAG with more refined and more up-to-date information that the original LLM could never have been exposed to because maybe it didn't exist when it was trained.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
And the key part about LLM that I want you to remember is that it's nothing more than the next token predictor. That's all this thing is doing.
Right. It's a parrot. It's
a parrot.
It's a parrot. And people are still saying, though, that if you have an automated parrot that enables your mind to start to see things that you wouldn't see because people have a hard time getting started, like they have a hard time starting anything, like just opening a blank page and saying, let me write a letter to my congressperson about something I'm upset about. They more likely will jot down a few ideas, just ideas, and make lists of ideas. And then they want somebody else to take those set of ideas and turn them into a persuasive brief or persuasive letter. And there are a lot of people that can't do that. Like there are a lot of people that take a very long time to do that. And the interesting part is if you use a tool like this parrot-like tool that gives you at least some rough version based on those ideas that you just happen to fling into it, it gets your juices going. And years ago, I represented this company, and it had an interesting set of people involved because they're still alive, and their names are Dave and Peter Weiner. They're brothers. And Dave Weiner is one of the original thinkers. He was actually associated with VisiCorp and he had this thing called VisiText when VisiCalc was the original spreadsheet for the Apple II computer. There was an idea of rolling out other similar applications. We're talking back in the 1970s now. We're talking way, way back when personal computers were just starting to hit the scene. And VisiText was this, quote, idea processor. And the idea was you essentially put your ideas as they came to you into an outline structure. It eventually got renamed to think tank. Now, he never had the next idea. Now, maybe today he does, but back then he didn't have the next idea. We should have some automation, just the way in which VisiCalc eventually had macros that allowed some automation of the spreadsheet. We should have some macros that maybe could take this outline and turn it into something automatically. That never happened. You could argue it took 50 years later to get to the point where that notion of punching in some number of ideas can generate the parrot-like function or paralegal-like function if you think about it in the law space, or associate-like function if you think about young lawyers, that creates something. And this goes to the whole job market thing we talked about, which is if you're a lawyer these days and you're capable of using one or several of these programs, because sometimes you can compare and contrast, you can actually generate a lot of draft work pretty seamlessly and automatically without a lot of paralegal or young associate work or help. Now, older attorneys that are unwilling to touch a keyboard, they're never going to do anything other than delegate to the younger paralegal or younger associate. But I can tell you there's a group of people that are more like in their 30s, 40s, and 50s, and some in their 60s, like myself, who are totally into this legal tech stuff, not because they expected to kind of give the final answer, but much more because they see it as augmenting their intelligence, augmenting human intelligence. The different kind of AI, what sometimes is called IA, intelligence augmentation. And that to me is like a major leap, that you could have people start to feel like they're getting some amplification out of a machine, albeit a parrot-like approach, because it has a lot of legal information in it. It's probably sucking every single federal filing that's on the PACER system, which is millions and billions of documents, right?
Yeah, I'll tell you two follow-on comment that you said. So because of this capability, at the last company, we got rid of the entire marketing department.
Right.
We're like, instead of going for quality, we're going to generate as many of these things and use it as a posting ammunition, and whichever tracks toward SEO, we'll just create more of that.
Right, exactly.
And your friend who you said could automate this, the reason it doesn't sound repetitive and kind of like not worthwhile is the fact that the pattern that you're talking about, it's not just one parrot, it's hundreds of millions of parrots. So you can literally pick the theme and say, construct the next sentence in the voice of a pirate. And it'll actually insert the right, exclamations in order to sound like a pirate talking. But
no, Jan, it's amazing. Let me tell you something. I did something really interesting, and I don't think the Trump team even thought of this. I got to tell the story because I'm going to send you the work product, and I think you're going to be pretty amazed. I said to myself, imagine that there was somebody sitting in that New York musty, smelly courtroom. Everyone's commenting on how bad I'm from New York. I know those courtrooms. I'm a member of the bar in New York. The federal courthouse is much cleaner and much more modern, where SBF was tried recently and convicted. But the state court system in Lower Manhattan is really old and hasn't gotten much in the way of improvements. So everyone is like, there's this ex-president of the United States that's sitting in this musty courtroom that smells like old soup, according to various people, and it's like bad breath and old soup is how it's described, rotting food. And apparently the HVAC system doesn't work very well, so it was really cold on the first day, and Trump complained about it. And I said to myself, imagine that there was a savvy IT person, AI person, computer person sitting at counsel table with just a high-powered laptop, and he or she is listening to the opening statement by the prosecution. And they've got their recorder on, so they're generating voice to text of that opening statement like it's a court report. And they're getting that text because they don't know what that person's going to say until they say it, right? And then they feed that in. And this is what I did. I took the opening statement that was given by the prosecution that's available a day later on a transcript. And I fed it into ChatGPT and I said a bunch of keywords around, I want to imagine an effective defense opening statement for Trump. And I did a lot of detailed description of what I wanted based on what the prosecution said. Like, this is real time, right? Most lawyers do their opening statement oblivious to what the prosecution's going to say because they don't know what the prosecution's going to say. They can guess, they can infer, but they don't know exactly what they're going to say. So in real time, they presumably will want some improvement. Now, maybe Todd Blanche, the lead lawyer, maybe in real time he's fast enough that he actually absorbed all that information. Oh, I got to change my opening statement. According to everyone that heard his opening statement, I just saw the transcript. They said it wasn't really super effective. It was, quote, rambling and really didn't hit a home run. Didn't strike out, but didn't hit a home run. And I essentially did this little thought experiment of, well, imagine in real time, you're sitting in a courtroom and you're getting all this data and you're asking for some help to see if you can improve your opening statement. I have to tell you, I was really surprised at what came back. I'm going to send you what came back and then we'll do another discussion about it because I'd like to get your critical commentary on it. But from my point of view, it was probably a better thematic presentation of an opening statement in what came back based on all the stuff that I put in, which I think had some additional value, than what was actually delivered by Trump's lawyer. And it happened within like 30 seconds. It was like VisiCalc. It was all the numbers were immediate. And so you could call it a parrot, but I have to tell you, it might be better than Trump's lawyer's presentation.
Do you remember you turned me on to a book called Rainbow Something? It was written by a computer science guy, University of San Diego.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. Yeah, I'm trying to remember. Yeah. I can't remember.
But you know what I'm talking about. And they had like a glass and earpiece.
Yeah.
And that co-pilot you're talking about, there are already riffs on that in commercial.
Right.
And I think that's exactly how co-pilot's going to happen.
Right.
If you have a sales force that maybe doesn't have access to an in-house expert, there's nothing to prevent the real-time generation of this information so the salesman can be like a super salesman where he's super knowledgeable. And going back to what we're talking about with legal documents and so forth, because I was able to actually customize and tailor these solutions, I think this is just going to keep growing and growing and growing, where in-house requirement is a no-brainer. You just go out and you decide which LLM you're going to choose or license or pick.
Right.
No one's going to be the wiser. The weights aren't going to change. And, we only got to talk about RAG, but there's also something called PEFT, perimeter efficient fine tuning, something called LoRa, low rank adapter. Okay. And then I'll tell you more about this later. But what I'm trying to say is that all these really clever ways of customizing very, very good parrots, as we've been calling them,
right,
will enable you to do things really well. And I think very much, I'll give you one example, okay? We had the job of trying to figure out the differences between different contracts.
Right.
And instead of trying to digest everything, which you're making a mistake of, in essence, giving same value for every word within a document.
Right.
What I found is that there's a lot of boilerplate language.
Right.
So if I can identify a boilerplate, I would do the equivalent of redacting that part out.
Right.
So I wouldn't even bother doing analysis. And what that did was I can reduce like a 15-page document, 50-page document to paragraphs that only amounted to like page and a half or 3 pages, that all the information that I was trying to extract.
Right.
So I increased the value of where I wanted to zero in, 5, 10-fold. And then these things worked infinitely better as I was trying to retrieve them using the LLM. So I absolutely believe in what you say. And I think this is where it's going to go, where people who belong to that 90% are going to figure out how to turn, their internal, musty, untouched documents that have been sitting around doing nothing into like a gold mine.
Well, that's what some big law firms have now, AI divisions run by non-lawyers. And sometimes they're actual separate LLCs that are being funded as though we're experimenting with, say Wilson Sonsini or some big law firm that has a massive amount of historical data, call it contract data, but it's more than just contract data. It's a gold mine of information that pertains to startups. Like there's just a lot of startups that they do. Fenwick and West does. It's like 5 or 10 big law firms in Silicon Valley that literally are now saying, we see an AI future for the law firm. Now, maybe it'll start with marketing, like we'll enable something that gives fast questions to a founder. So a founder can go to the website and ask some questions, and the LLM that the law firm put together will provide some, rough answers. And the founder will get so excited about, oh, I'll be able to use this law firm's platform, and therefore I got to buy into whatever subscription or whatever new billing model happens. But they're doing experiments and they're investing some significant amount of money in this whole field that's called law tech. And it is starting to get a lot of interest about where does this head in what might be called the relatively short term, long run, which is probably the next 3 to 5 years, because one consequence might well be there'll be more data scientists and AI type people inside law firms than there'll be lawyers, then there'll be associate lawyers. Like effectively, the partners will be along the lines of, why do we need all these associates? I mean, the billing model right now needs associates, but if the billing model changes, a lot of them might be, maybe we'll have a much smaller class of associates that make their way to super partnership status, because effectively we have all these robots. They happen to be called AIs, but they're like robots that are doing the work. And of course, we have to supervise it. We have to sign off on it. We have to revise it. We have to approve it. We can't just deliver it to a judge in the way it comes out. And there are a lot of lawyers that have been criticized for doing the latter and mistakenly relying on stuff that's garbage. But there'll be some set of super law firms that have figured out the new platform model that effectively has a whole different billing system baked into it.
Yeah, I have a very specific questions I wanted to ask. Okay. So what the future you're foretold has already happened in asset management.
Right.
So in the last 15 years, I heard that 1/3 of the new hires at Goldman Sachs are STEM, computer programmers, data scientists, that ilk. Right. So if what you foresee actually comes to pass, lawyers used to make really nice living that gave birth to other smart kids who went on to be the next entrepreneur or whatever. And what you're predicting is the inverse of what the economists call the multiplier effect.
Right.
What happens when 10, 20, 30, 40% of the white collar jobs gets wiped out? Do we all revert to basic minimum income or?
No, let me tell you, I think what happens, and I'm seeing it, I'm already seeing it. I think people that are displaced, that are creative people, or that are nurtured through their parents to be creative people or curious people, just being curious. You don't even have to be creative. You be curious and then just extend yourself. You're not necessarily brilliantly creative. You're just curious and you tackle a problem. You just follow a problem to its legitimate end. And they're going to be more entrepreneurial. So I see more and more, and I just get calls every day. It's pretty funny. Lee says to me, why do you even take these calls? Because they never have any money. They never really want to do anything other than get some free advice. But it typically goes like this. So I got laid off from my job. The conversation goes like this. I got laid off from my job, and I had this brilliant idea at home on my own. And I was laid off, so I was on unemployment or whatever supplemental income from severance that they had. And I came up with this invention. And I read a bunch of stuff online, and I filed my own provisional patent application. I didn't hire a lawyer. I filed my own provisional. And I read this stuff about incorporating myself. I filed my own corporation. And I read this stuff about getting a trademark, and I filed my own trademark. And I read this stuff about copywriting software, and I filed my own copyright registration on some software that I created with Copilot or GitHub or open source or whatever they did. And I think I've got a startup. I don't have a team yet, but I want to get to the next step. And I know you've helped lots of startups. I'm not asking for an investment, but I'd like to pick your brain about where do you think I go? Because I can show you a demo, I could show you my slides, I could do this, I could do that. And I have to tell you, they really do sincerely want to add value to the world. In whatever their invention, it can be a piece of software, it can be hardware, it can be a combination, it could be a million different things. And I think we're going to see this greening of America around people that get out of college that don't want to work at particular dead-end jobs or aren't hired even. They're going to be, at least the curious ones and the ambitious ones, are going to be self-starting their own little businesses. And it might even be just selling merchandise on Amazon, which there are a lot of people that make a lot of money doing that as private label sales. And they learn how to do that. And I think we're going to see more and more of that kind of entrepreneurship, which in a way is good. But in a way, I think when you deal with the professions like law, it changes everything that essentially everyone just says, I'll be my own lawyer as well. And there are people like that just say, well, I can be my own lawyer, or I can find people. They do it. And
I believe everything that you say, right? But you can draw similar parallels to indie film, and before then, self-publish music.
Right.
Okay. So for every Ed Sheeran and Justin Bieber,
right,
you can see all the flush outs that show up in, America's Got Talent or something like that.
Right.
So how I can believe that we're going to turn into two, bump distribution society where, but I still don't think that vision scales up to feed as many people as the current economy is feeding.
Then you get basic income or some other. Then you get some other. I mean, it's like there is basic income already in the U.S. If you go into any big city, there are social service resources that will basically get you some sort of basic subsistence type income. And in Germany, this is true, which is why Germany has so many immigrants that come over, because the Germans just give people instantly access to funds on the view that they don't want people on the streets that are dying on the streets, right? Like you look around San Francisco, even.
To that, I would say by, countering that, the very same city you're talking about, our cities aren't doing so great.
No, they're not.
We're all just kind of dying. And as far as Germany, this is the one issue that got Angela Merkel booted. Probably the most intelligent, great leader that country's had. They're like, okay, had enough.
Right.
So
Right.
I don't know how this transition happens without a whole lot of social tumult. So
well, see the film. We just saw it a couple of nights.
Civil War.
Civil War. I have to tell you, it's really, really plausible that what's the scenario that's played out at a high level, the detail level, there's a lot of gaps, but at a high level, the idea that the country splits into essentially three separate groups that are all not willing to have Washington, D.C. tell them what to do, and they go on the attack, like what we saw on January 6th, but amplified a millionfold in that film. It's really well done, and it sets up in your mind. I think it's the worst thing for Trump that's ever happened is that film, because anyone that's undecided that goes to see that film will absolutely not vote for Trump. I'm convinced that if they see that film and they say that's the kind of anarchy that he wants and he wants to have happen and that he's inducing in this country, and we need someone that unifies us and enables us to have, maybe not as big a bureaucracy as we have in the federal government, maybe not as big a tax system as we have, but fundamentally a common defense against enemies. Because the one thing that's not covered by the film is when Washington, D.C. is under attack and the president is essentially in line to get assassinated by an amazing army that descends upon Washington, D.C., who's in control of the nuclear football if China or Russia decide to attack us? Because it's like you have to have someone, and what you come away with is a view that one of the reasons there always has to be an external threat to the United States is because it enables people to have a common enemy and some unification of we got to stay together in this, because if we don't have that, who the hell is going to deal with a future attacker that may decide to be opportunistic? I mean, that's the one gap in the film that they don't really cover that maybe they could have covered. But that issue came up when Gorbachev was being essentially pushed out. I think someone even asked him, and he smiled, like, who's in control of the nuclear button if you're getting pushed out? Like who's got control of what could happen to those nuclear warheads? And to me, it's almost like the Cold War and the nuclear buildup is designed to protect the unification of like 3 major powers, 5 major powers, whatever you want to call the cluster of different major powers. India,
I think you're absolutely right. You know, who thought that China and Russia would align themselves? We thought that, once we started doing business with PRC and hopefully Russia had a more graceful transition post Yeltsin, that they'd be, more Western friendly.
Right.
It's a bizarre world order we never counted on. And answer to your question, when I read some of the previews for Civil War, I got so startled. Maybe Biden, instead of forgiving loans, should be buying tickets to that movie so everybody can go see it. But I know of that film, and I'm so shell-shocked that I've been watching like rom-com with my wife. Like the other day, we saw Four Weddings and a Funeral again. I want to think happy thoughts. I just can't stomach.
You got to see it. You got to see it on the big screen.
Really?
And you got to see it from. There is an artistic point of view to it, which is it's about how these photojournalists get all these really shocking pictures in a front line. And it's in a particular story, the lead character is a female photojournalist who really is burnt out and is ready to end her career. And there's some young, right out of high school or right out of college or right out of community college, photojournalist student who's enamored with her and figures out a way to get some mentorship from her. It's a really good story within a story of how people get excited about photojournalism, because they get really excited about going to the front lines. Like, to them, getting that picture that becomes like the winning picture on the front page of the New York Times. There's a story within a story there.
I think this is why Israel is keeping journalists out of Gaza.
Yeah, right?
Because 2 days ago, the 4th of the year was some woman, it was very, very touching. I think like she lost 9 out of 11 family members in that bombing thing. And this photojournalist caught it just in the right time. And I was thinking, like, one too many of these pictures, and it's gonna turn into like a PR nightmare, for that war.
The same thing is true in Russia. I mean, you could argue the guy that's been quote detained for like a year, the Wall Street Journal reporter. His reporting was revealing what's really going on. In Russia. Well, we'll do this again, because I think this AI stuff is going to have and is having already a huge impact, and the ramifications are so complicated and so interesting to think about in ways that probably we'll still be talking about them 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, even as they occur.
So this is moving so fast, and just because I change topic, I don't want to lose like my finely edge skills. So I'm actually in touch with 2 other guys who've gone on to different company, and we're burning our weekend time to figure out assign homeworks to each other so we get to work on the coolest, newest things. So, if you come across some interesting project where somebody says, I don't want to spend the money that Wilson Sansoni's doing, but, is there something I can try or whatever, I would love to talk to somebody like that just to see what's of interest out there, So.
I think there are a lot of projects like that, and I'll keep you in mind because I do think the more that you actually apply these ideas to new data sets in a way that reveals something about what comes out of it and how you can refine that, inevitably there'll be other great inventions and innovations that come from all that.
And I think it's going to be very domain specific. There's a reason why things that's trained on GitHub writes better code. Things trained on Facebook posts write better short messages,
Right.
Sausage in, what gets fed in is what comes out,
Right.
So, yeah.
Stay safe. We'll do it again. Give my regards to your daughters and tell Minhee. I'll send you the link. We can have Minhee listen to this because we'll give her a big applause. Take care. Bye-bye.
Tune in next time on The Valley Current.